Chapter 1: The Promise of Safety. Episode 1: The First Morning After Forever. Scene 1. Morning returned to the Dreamwilds, exactly as it had promised it would.
The sun rose gently over the sighing shore, spilling gold across the water and waking the new home with the same careful kindness it had shown on the first morning of forever. Light slipped through open doors and uncurtained windows, the sea breathed in its sleep. Somewhere, far out beyond the mist, a gull cried once and fell silent again. Everything looked right, the doors were still open, they had stayed that way since the end of the dance. Since the night fear had loosened its grip and the world had exhaled for the first time in generations. No locks, no thresholds guarded by doubt, the new home stood exactly as it had been imagined, welcoming, warm, and shared. And yet, beneath the beauty, the Dreamwilds hummed, not the old, drowsy harmony of safety earned, but something thinner, a held note, a waiting sound. It lived beneath the birdsong and the tide, a low resonance that did not drift or fade. The forest listened to itself now, as if checking, again and again, that nothing had gone wrong. Teddy woke before the sun fully cleared the horizon, not to birds, not to wind in the leaves, but to numbers. He lay still, staring at the wooden beams above him, his mind already arranging the day into quiet columns. Who had arrived yesterday and might return, who had not yet been seen, how long each visit usually took, where delays tended to form. His paw moved before he fully realized it, reaching for the charcoal and slate beside his bed. He began to write without sitting up, names first, then notes. A faint knock sounded at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Teddy paused, listening. The knock came again. Identical in rhythm, careful not to disturb, careful not to offend. He added a mark beside the first name and stood, the floorboards answering his weight with a soft, obedient creak. Outside, the line had already begun to form. Lucy was awake as well. She had been awake for some time. Steam curled gently from the kettle as she poured tea into mismatched cups, her movements precise in the way that comes from repetition rather than rest. She smiled as she worked, automatically at first, then with effort. As she noticed the tiredness pulling at the corners of her eyes, "Careful," she murmured to herself as she passed a cup to a waiting hedgehog. "It's hot?" The hedgehog thanked her twice. Lucy nodded, already turning to the next cup. She did not look toward the door, though she could feel it open wide behind her, letting the morning and its visitors flow in uninterrupted. Every time someone stepped across the threshold, a small tightening passed through her chest, followed by the familiar release of purpose. "They need us," she told herself gently. "That means we're doing something right." Still, when she reached for the kettle again, her paw hesitated for the briefest moment before lifting it. Thinksy stood before the small mirror in the far room. The silver glow along her fur was still there. Soft, luminous, unmistakably hers, but it no longer rose on its own. She breathed in, centered herself, and let the light gather deliberately, like striking a match in still air. For a moment, the glow flickered uncertainly, then it held. She smiled at her reflection, though the smile did not quite reach her eyes. "Good," she whispered, "that's good." From the doorway, voices drifted in. Low, overlapping, threaded with worry carefully disguised as politeness. "Is it safe today? I thought I felt a cold draft last night. Just checking. Nothing's changing, is it?" a mole adjusted his scarf, a pair of mice clutched each other's paws, even the cat in boots lingered at the edge of the gathering longer than necessary, hat tipped low, gaze sharp beneath its brim. No one crossed the threshold without glancing back at the forest, no one left without glancing at the three. The Dreamwilds answered them in small ways. The wind passed, light but alert, carrying with it fragments of concern it had picked up elsewhere. Leaves rustled too quickly for the calm morning air. The sea sighed. Not deeply, but often. The bass hum did not swell, it waited. Teddy stepped outside at last, slate under his arm. His presence quieted the murmuring just a fraction. Not with awe, but with expectation. He nodded once, acknowledging the line, and added another mark to his list. Lucy brought out more tea. Thinksy let her light brighten, just enough. Behind them, the open door remained exactly as it had been at the end of the story that came before, wide, generous, unguarded. But now, instead of freedom flowing outward, something else moved through it. Requests, concerns, the unspoken need to be reassured again, and again, and again. The sun climbed higher, the morning settled into place, and the Dreamwilds, healed but watchful, listened closely, waiting to hear whether this new day would sing, or simply repeat.
Scene 2. From ritual to routine.
The clearing filled before anyone announced that it was time. They came quietly at first, gathering near the worn stones where the dance had once begun without invitation or expectation. Some sat, some stood, others waited at a respectful distance, as if unsure how close was appropriate now that the miracle had become available. No one spoke of the dance as a miracle anymore, they called it help. A squirrel argued softly with her sister about a borrowed acorn, a badger paced in tight circles, muttering about sleepless nights. Further back, Eeyore stood alone, exactly where one would expect him to stand, staring at the ground with mild resignation. "I don't think anything's wrong," he said to no one in particular, "but it feels a bit gray today, thought I'd cue anyway." The line shifted forward by a single step. When Teddy, Lucy, and Thinksy took their places, the crowd straightened. Not in reverence, but in readiness. This had a shape now, a sequence, an order that everyone understood without being told. They formed the triangle they had formed so many times before. Once, it had happened in laughter and breathless surprise. Once, the world itself had leaned in, unsure what would follow. Now, Teddy adjusted his stance with a practiced glance at the ground. A fraction to the left, better balance, more efficient flow. Lucy lifted her head and smiled. Not the wild, relieved smile of survival, but the careful warmth she had learned to offer strangers. the kind that reassured without inviting questions. Thinksy let her light rise. It did not burst, it flowed. The dance began. The rhythm was correct, every step landed where it should, the movements aligned with the clearing, the roots beneath the soil loosening just enough to carry the energy forward. The argument between the squirrels softened, words lost their edge, turning slippery and unimportant. The badger's pacing slowed, his shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted without being named. Eeyore blinked. "Well," he said after a moment, "that's a bit better." Applause followed. Not thunderous, not odd, polite, appreciative, familiar. Someone nodded and gestured for the next pair to step forward. The dance ended, the clearing exhaled. But only briefly. Teddy lowered his paw, already recalculating how long that had taken, how many remained, whether the sun would last long enough to get through them all. Lucy's smile held, though she felt the faint pull in her chest that came after giving something away without quite knowing how much had gone with it. Thinksy swayed slightly, the silver along her fur dimming a fraction before she gathered it back into place. The line moved. Again, a fox demanded reconciliation after a quarrel that had ended hours earlier. A hedgehog wanted reassurance that a strange dream meant nothing at all. Someone asked, half joking, half serious, whether the dance could help crops grow faster this year. It worked, every time, and every time, the result lasted just long enough for the next concern to step forward. From the edge of the clearing, Little Mai watched with her arms folded. "Ha!" she said at last. "You lot look like a very fancy machine." No one reacted. "So," she continued cheerfully, raising her voice just enough to be heard, "if I put my worries in here." She mimed feeding something invisible between Teddy and Lucy. "And you wiggle like that?" She twirled a finger. Out pops happiness. "Convenient," Lucy laughed, relieved by the sound of it, and the moment passed, but the words did not. The dance ended again, the applause followed, the line shifted forward, the magic remained powerful, but the wonder had thinned, stretched across too many needs, until it felt less like a song and more like a service rendered on request. The clearing did not bloom the way it once had, it simply functioned, and somewhere beneath the soil, the Dreamwilds listened to the rhythm repeat, noting the absence of silence between the steps.
Scene 3. The Vigilant Quiet.
Beyond the clearing and the open doors of the new home, the Dreamworld stretched wide. Whole again, yet not at rest. The scars left by the Queen's reign had faded, the soil no longer screamed beneath careless paws, the trees no longer recoiled from touch, rivers ran clear, and the sky held its light without strain. By every visible measure, the world had healed, but healing was not the same as ease. Deep beneath the forest floor, the roots of the world tree lay loosened at last. They no longer tightened in pain or anger, no longer groaned beneath the weight of old fear, and yet, they did not fully relax. They held their shape with an unfamiliar stiffness, as though bracing for a blow that never came, not wounded, only weary. The river of melodies continued its long journey through the heart of the land. Its waters still carried song, but the tune had changed. Where once it had laughed and leapt, now it flowed carefully, its notes measured and restrained, like a voice lowered in a sick room. The river seemed afraid of its own joy, as though too much music might shatter something fragile and unseen. Even the wind had altered its ways. Once, it had been a playful messenger, darting between branches and over hills, carrying laughter, secrets, and the promise of movement. Now it moved with purpose but without delight, gathering small worries as it passed and delivering them faithfully from glade to glade. A bent twig here, a chill that lingered a moment too long, a shadow that seemed darker than it should have been. None of these things meant anything on their own. Together, they meant everything. The Dreamwilds had learned a new fear. Before, the world had watched for darkness, for the return of claws, curses, and cruel magic. Now it watched the light instead, guarding it jealously, anxiously, as though it might slip away the moment no one was looking. Creatures paused in their work to study the sky. Was that cloud always that color? Did you see that flower? It was brighter yesterday. The river hesitated there. Did you hear it? Every question ended the same way. Eyes turned, not toward the forest, but toward the three. When Teddy, Lucy, and Thinksy walked through the glowing meadow, the flowers awakened beneath their steps. Petals lit from within, one after another, soft gold and pale silver rising to greet them like held breath finally released. For a moment, the meadow shone, then the three passed on, and just as gently, the light dimmed. The blossoms did not wither, they did not close, they simply went still again, as if unsure whether they were allowed to keep shining on their own. The message was quiet, but unmistakable. The world no longer trusted itself. The somatic echo of the Dreamwilds, its living, feeling body, had begun to respond not to threat, but to exhaustion, not to terror, but to strain held too long and too carefully hidden. The land felt what the three did not say aloud. It felt the weight of being needed, the effort of staying gentle, the fear of failing after succeeding once so completely. The forest did not cry out, it waited, and in that waiting, alert, hushed, and tightly balanced, the Dreamwilds revealed a truth more unsettling than any lingering shadow. The age of fighting darkness had ended. What came next would be harder, because now, the greatest danger was not losing the world, but losing the light that held it together. And somewhere, deep within the careful silence, something listened and took note, not with malice, not yet, but with interest.